Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Crystal Fitzsimons, and I'm the Director of School and Out-of-School Time Programs for the Food Research and Action Center, FRAC. And in my role, I oversee our work to increase access to school meals, summer food, after-school meals to make sure that kids are not going hungry. I'm really excited to be part of the summit today, and I'm really pleased that Chobani has decided to pull people together to talk about this important topic. As we all know, the last year has been unprecedented. I have not seen anything like it in the 20 plus years that I have worked at FRAC. Last spring, overnight, schools closed. And when schools closed, millions of children across the country lost access to free school meals. Those meals help struggling families make ends meet. They keep hunger at bay for millions of children across the country, and they ensure that children receive a nutritious school breakfast and lunch each day so that they can learn and grow healthy. At the same time that schools were closing and kids were losing access to school meals, millions of families lost jobs and wages. When the pandemic hit, the number of children living in households that were struggling to put food on the table grew from 1 in 7, which was already way too high, and we already had an epidemic on our hands, to 1 in 4. And as the floor was dropping out from underneath millions of struggling families, the people on this panel, the champions who I think of working across the country tirelessly to make sure that kids are getting access to nutritious meals, really stepped in to counter that and to provide the nutrition that kids needed. We have a pretty amazing panel today. Reggie Ross he's a school nutrition consultant for the North Carolina Department of Education, and as already mentioned, is the president of the School Nutrition Association. Tamara Sandberg is with Save the Children and is the U.S. Food Security and Nutrition Advisor. And Karen Bach is the president and CEO of the Idaho Food Bank. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panel, who combined has decades of experience working to feed children and to countering childhood hunger. And Reggie, I'm going to start with you. When schools closed last spring, how did Charlotte's school nutrition programs pivot to continue to serve the students?
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Well, the transition started for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, just like it did for a lot of our school districts across the country on March 13th, of last year. And that date is planted in my mind because we had just completed our legislative action conference in Washington. I had just gotten home, and I got a call late in the afternoon on Friday, which is very unusual, from a director stating that schools were going to be closed starting that Monday, March 16th. And she was having to put a plan together in order to feed students. Now, Charlotte-Mecklenburg is a very large school district, approximately 134,000 students, 176 sites. And so we talked about, what do I do? How do I feed students? You know, we in school nutrition have a love for students. And if you are around any of the managers and the staff in school nutrition cafeterias, you know, sometimes you'll even hear them say, these are my babies, and I love them. And they really do. And they're very concerned about their well-being and their health and their nutrition. And so the question became, how do we reach all of these students if they are going to be at home? Well, Kathy Beam, who was the director, had the responsibility of putting that plan together for feeding those students. And there were many strategies that she had to face and challenges there in order to put the plan together. How many sites would she open? She couldn't open all of her sites, but she knew that she had to be very strategic in terms of which sites that she needed to open in order to meet the needs, especially those students who were on free and reduced status, who she knew needed those meals. So she came up with a plan down to 66 sites versus that 176 where students would be fed. And then she thought about, well, what about the food? So she didn't want to lose food at all of these sites. So she had to put a plan together then to gather up all this food and get it to those strategic sites in order to feed the students. She also had to consider her staffing needs. She could not employ all of her 1,400 employees in school nutrition during that period. What was going to happen? I mean, she started getting gripes from some of the staff because, she had to make selections and decisions about who was going to work at these particular sites. And this was a very quick turnaround that had to take place. How was she going to serve? We were so used to serving in the brick and mortar buildings. And in that setting, we had students who came to us. They come to the cafeteria, they go through the line for the most part. But this was totally new for us. We were going to have to find ways to package meals so that the meals could go home for our students. And so, we were used to just the clamshells, and that's pretty much all that we had in the cafeteria, plates, and we'd wrap them. So she realized that we had to come up with something new in order to be able to serve these students. So initially, that's what the plan was. And the other part to this was that we didn't even know about PPE and PPP and all of the common language now that's a part of the pandemic at that particular time. And our people were concerned just about feeding students. And a lot of times they really didn't take into consideration their own particular safety. They just wanted to feed kids. So there was no social distancing initially. They weren't wearing masks at first when they first started in the process. So these were things that as she moved along, she had to make changes to. But as a part of the initial plan, it was about getting the food together, getting ready so that we could serve these students. And then there were questions about, well, what if students don't have transportation? How will we get the meals to those students? Not every parent can come by a school site and pick up meals. So all of those things had to be considered. And the use of transportation buses in the school system, that was something new because we'd never delivered meals on school buses or activity buses. So all of these things were taken into consideration. Then we came up with curbside service. This was something new to us. So they could come by, they could drive by, and they could pick up meals. So Kathy and all of the directors that I know in my particular zone and across the country, they became creative because the most important thing for all of them was understanding that we had the need to feed children regardless of the situations. And that's what they did. They jumped in and did it. SNA did a survey back in May of last year that found that 81% of programs across the country came up with some type of plan of grab and go pickup for meals, because we all realized this was a way for all of us to reach out and feed families. Then 42% of our school districts across the country actually delivered meals to homes, and 32% actually used the transportation route. And as the program went on, we even saw them come up with creative ways to box meals that could be sent home for an entire week. And the last part of this piece for our director and for Kathy at this particular time was that the state of North Carolina had these plans. It was plan A, B, and C. And plan A being in-person, B was a hybrid plan of in-person and virtual, and plan C was all virtual. So they had to consider all of these particular ways that school was going to be in session in order to feed kids. And we have adjusted over time. And what's happened is even with, some of the time the plans change at the very last minute. She thinks that she's going to be in the hybrid plan where some students are coming in and then some meals are being sent home, and then they'll switch to virtual completely. So in the midst of this, we have also been very nimble to react to what's actually taking place. But, the desire for all school nutrition professionals has been to make certain that we feed hungry students. And one thing that we already knew, and what was found out by the rest of the country and the world, is that we are essential. to the success of feeding students and making sure that they have healthy and nutritious meals. And our employees in school nutrition are true heroes across the country for the work they've done. So I'm just extremely proud of what we've done in order to get to this point in serving students across this great country.
Thanks, Reggie. And I have to say, as someone who works a lot with school nutrition staff, I've just been in awe of the amazing work that they've been doing over the last year. And, you know, the education community has been such an important partner in ending hunger. And across the country, when schools close, so many school districts just prioritize making sure that kids had access to meals. It's been really incredible to watch. Karen, I'm hoping you could share with us a little bit about how the need has grown in your community and the families that you serve.
Certainly, Crystal, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this really important conversation about childhood hunger. I want to thank Chobani for making this happen. I'd also like to give a nod to Feeding America and to my fellow CEOs and our national network of 200 food banks. It's an amazing group of really smart, dedicated people working every day on our common mission to end hunger in our country. So in looking at Idaho, as in all states, Idaho has seen an increase in the number of people who are facing food insecurity due to the pandemic. Feeding America's recent research on Map the Meal Gap tells us that 1 in 7 individuals and as many as 1 in 5 of our children could be living with food insecurity due to the impact of the pandemic. We've certainly seen an increase in the number of food insecure individuals and children within our state. And in surveying our partner network, which consists of 465 community-based organizations and schools, they're sharing with us that they're seeing a higher percentage of new people coming for food assistance than they've ever seen before. So in response, the Idaho Food Bank has increased our food distribution by an average of 40% over the past year, and we're reaching more than 197,000 people every month with our services. The other point it's important to consider is that Idaho is a very rural state. The state covers 83,000 square miles, and about 88% of that land is considered rural. Rural counties have disproportionately higher levels of hunger compared to the urban counties. And in fact, when we look at food insecure children and look at 84% of US counties have the highest percentage of food insecure children in the rural areas. At the Idaho Food Bank, we believe that your location should not dictate your access to nutrition when you're in need. And we literally go the extra mile to meet people where they are and deliver that food. In order to reach many of the rural communities that they may not have a brick and mortar pantry in a local community. So we utilize what we call our mobile pantry program. And this enables the Idaho Food Bank to take large quantities of emergency food to those hard to reach areas where we partner them with local community members who bring the volunteers together to unload and distribute the food to those in need. Those mobile pantry trucks have definitely been moving more food since the beginning of the pandemic. And we're continuing to monitor the different levels across our partner network to see where their needs are shifting, if they've had an increase in need in their community so that we can be responsive to those.
Yeah, it's incredible the amount of work that food banks have been doing and have really stepped in. Tamara, I'd love to bring you into the conversation as well. Save the Children does such amazing work. I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about how Save the Children has been working to counter childhood hunger during the pandemic.
Great. Well, thank you, Crystal. And I'd like to also offer my thanks to Chobani. Save the Children's been proud to partner with Chobani for years, and we're very honored to be included on this panel. So thank you. So when the pandemic struck in March 2020, Save the Children was seeing firsthand the struggles that families were facing trying to keep food on the table. And so we quickly pivoted, modifying our kindergarten readiness and third grade reading and math proficiency programming, and reassigned our frontline staff members to meet this immediate need. because we know kids can't be hungry for knowledge if they're hungry for food. So Save the Children is committed to combating child hunger across rural America and working to ensure that every child has the nourishing food they need to learn, thrive, and succeed, both through our programs and our advocacy work. And I will mention, it's actually a return to our roots. Save the Children got our start in the United States as a hunger relief organization by serving hot food to kids in the coal camps in Harlan County, Kentucky during the Great Depression. And those efforts became the model for what's now the Federal Hot Lunch Program. So we're actually returning to our roots, and as part of our COVID response efforts, our staff across communities we serve have helped prepare and deliver nearly 19 million meals to children in some of the county's most impoverished rural communities. We've done, as Karen mentioned, we've also been involved in mobile meal delivery in partnership with community organizations and school districts. Save the Children has provided staff support, funding for mobile meal vehicles, food for backpack programs. And we've also been involved in distributing over 250,000 food boxes through the USDA's Farmers to Families Food Bank program, which has just been an incredible asset to the communities we serve. So we've been able to work with distributors that have boxes of beautiful food, 30 pounds each, and take them straight to the communities and where people can access that directly from the trucks. So I'm also proud that Save the Children recently piloted an effort that we've done internationally, but had not ever done domestically. And that's our cash transfer pilot program. So we worked with families in California and Kentucky to get more dollars into the hands of moms and dads and help them make the best financial decision for their families. So over 700 families in Kentucky and California received over $640,000 in our pilot this past summer. And that cash assistance helped the families meet their most pressing needs and helped eliminate the agonizing choice that too many families in America are facing of having to pay food versus rent. Do I pay food or do I pay my heating bill? So this program has already shown great results, and we're anxious to expand it to other parts of the country. The last thing I'll mention is that we've also stepped up our advocacy work related to food insecurity and child hunger. We've partnered with many of the great organizations participating in this panel today to really push for legislative solutions to hunger, like the boost in the SNAP benefits, extension of waivers that make it easier to get meals to children, particularly in rural communities. We've leveraged Save the Children's advocacy arm and our existing supporter base through our Save the Children Action Network, mobilized almost 400,000 grassroots advocates through multiple email campaigns, sent over 80,000 messages to Congress to advocate for legislative solutions. So we're committed to partnering with Hungers to bring solutions to scale and ensuring that communities, especially rural communities, are able to make sure their kids have access to the food they need to thrive and succeed.
Oh, that's really helpful. And Tamara, I think you point out one of the work that you described is all amazing, but one of the things that I did want to lift up too is, providing additional resources to households to support their finances. Food is one of the most fungible pieces of a household's finance. They have to pay their rent, they have to pay their utility bills, but they can cut their food budget. And that is why families face so many hard choices when making sure that kids have access to food. Karen, I was hoping you might be able to talk about some of the most creative things that the food bank has done to serve families during the pandemic. I know that it has not been business as usual for you all.
Yeah, it definitely has not been business as usual. And I will start by saying how proud I am of the team at the Idaho Food Bank and our entire hunger relief network for our ability to quickly adjust to the new conditions. Agility is one of our core values as an organization, and last year really put that to a test. Within a matter of weeks, we had to change the way we were sourcing food, the way we were utilizing our volunteers, the way we distributed food, and at the same time significantly increase the volume of food that we were distributing. And of course, overlaying that was adjusting to all of the new safety requirements due to the pandemic. So yeah, there were a lot of moving parts all at the same time, but nobody stopped. We kept moving forward and said, we can figure this out. when the pandemic started, we knew that it wasn't going to have the same impact on every community in the same way at the same time. So we stood up what we called our crisis response team, where we had employees that were reaching out to our full network of 465 community partners, including schools, and finding out what their needs were, where were they today, how could we assist, what those needs were. And that allowed our team to put together a rapid response plan to meet the needs of that community, and then let that evolve as their needs shifted through the course of time. That was incredibly effective. At another point in time, our facility warehouse in Southwest Idaho became space constrained. We had more food than we were able to manage through that facility. So we contacted our local event center downtown. They didn't have a lot of events happening. So we contacted them, and within a matter of days, we were using their facility as an auxiliary warehouse, and also the space to set up our volunteer work, because now we were having to pre-pack boxes at a higher level than we ever had before. So we really needed that extra space for our volunteers to do that work. While it's not unique, another example, like other food banks across the country, we initiated what we call our community food distributions. And you've seen these stories on the news where in a big parking lot, there's lines of cars that are coming through to pick up those food boxes. The Farmers to Families program that Tamara mentioned, great resource to be able to provide those families. And at the height of the pandemic, we'd added 13 of those large-scale drive-through distributions, and that allowed us to serve an additional 7,600 households every month. So it was a way to really increase that reach. At the same time, we had an outpouring of support from the community members wanting to help. So we created a process to review those offers of help and to match them to the specific needs in their various communities. Those offers were far-reaching, but I'll just share a couple of them I think are good examples. We heard from a woman who worked at a local hospital who had a cargo van available. She also happened to have some teenagers who were not in school at that time, and she wanted to direct their energy in a positive way. So we were able to engage that group in making special deliveries, including taking food boxes to a senior complex and delivering the food boxes to the door for those seniors, which was greatly appreciated, of course. In another example, we had an event equipment company that, of course, saw their business decline overnight, and the owners wanted to keep their employees engaged in a positive way. So we worked with them, and overnight their trucks were turned into Idaho Food Bank trucks, and they were delivering food to the schools that the schools needed to stock their school pantries. So again, another way to really combine those who wanted to help and had resources with our needs as an organization to dramatically increase the services that we needed to provide. The stories of volunteers and supporters really go above and beyond what we could have imagined. And again, I'm really proud of our team's ability also to pivot. That seems to be the common word these days, and keep the focus on taking care of those children who are struggling and the families who are struggling.
Great. Yeah, it's been amazing to see communities really step in. Reggie, I was hoping, putting on your hat as the president of the School Nutrition Association, I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about some of the biggest challenges that the school nutrition professionals have faced over the last year as they've been working to serve children in the community.
Thank you, Crystal. And it's been interesting listening to Tamara and Karen talking about some of the challenges that they faced, and very, very similar to some of the same challenges that we're facing and have faced in school nutrition. I talked earlier about some of the logistics as far as our school nutrition programs, but I guess one of the greatest challenges for us is understanding that our school meal programs are very highly regulated. And one of our biggest challenges was just getting all of the various rules waived to allow us just to serve meals. That was a great challenge for us while still trying to be in compliance with USDA. So that was a great challenge to us. And it shouldn't be that hard for us in the case of a pandemic disaster to have to go through so much in order to feed kids. But we literally had to ask over and over again for various waivers as we were in the middle of the process, waivers that would allow us to be able to serve meals to our students. Area eligibility was one of the main questions. And when I talked about earlier about the director of Charlotte-Mecklenburg coming up with those sites, her major concern was with area eligibility. She wanted to make certain that she could serve any student that came in. Once we received the waiver as far as area eligibility was concerned, we were able then to serve all students regardless of where the school or the site was located. And that was really, really important to us. And another great challenge for us was all of the transportation barriers. And even though I mentioned about the use of school buses, activity buses, it was not a very smooth process initially. We had to get permission from the state in order to use, transportation. And there were all kinds of questions coming about who's going to pay for this, who's going to pay for that, whose funding was it going to be. And so, but we were able to work through all of those type challenging situations. And then at the beginning of the school year, another great challenge is that we realized that we were not serving the same amount of meals that we traditionally serve. We had programs that were serving 10%, 5% in some cases of the meals that they had served the previous year. And that has put a tremendous strain on our programs financially. So the financial sustainability for our programs is critical, and that has been a great challenge for us. But, one of the things that SNA that we have been advocating for is some relief for our programs so that we can continue to do the great things that we do in reaching and serving the students that we serve. And I guess finally on that, when we talk about staffing, it has been a really difficult challenge for our directors at the local level to deal with staffing concerns. If someone tests positive in a kitchen or even at a school and the whole staff has to go home, who's going to serve those students? So the directors have been in the midst shuffling staffs over here and over there in order to make certain that we meet the needs of the students wherever they are. So all of that has been a challenge for our programs. And I talked earlier about all the various hybrid plans and all of those kind of things. Our directors in small districts, one school districts up to the largest districts, they have had that challenge of how do I meet the needs of the students in this new environment? But I can say very proudly that they have met the challenge in all the situations. And because our focus, again, is making certain that we feed all students.
Thanks, Reggie. And I remember the push to get those waivers. We worked pretty closely with the School Nutrition Association and a lot of other partners, and we're thrilled when they came through. And I appreciated you elevating the area eligibility waiver, which has really allowed communities across the country to provide meals to any child who needs them, which I think is really important moving forward. Tamara, Karen mentioned that Idaho is a very rural state, and I know Save the Children does a lot of work in rural communities. I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about the unique needs that rural communities face in serving children during the pandemic.
Yeah, so for those listening who haven't spent much time in rural America, I'd like to paint a picture for you. Rural communities have a number of amazing strengths, very strong connection to where we live. We tend to appreciate the quiet lifestyle and the safety of the communities. We talk about it being a great place to raise children. There's strong social ties between people. We like being able to depend on the support of our friends and families. Stunning beauty from the Rockies and the rolling wheat fields in Karen's area to the Appalachian Hills and the tobacco fields where I am in Kentucky. Many locally owned businesses with entrepreneurial owners. So rural communities have a lot going for them, but we are also facing substantial challenges that are unique to rural communities. Economic instability and lack of job opportunities certainly happen in urban areas as well. But in rural communities, even before the pandemic, our residents have severely limited options for earning a living. In many communities, low wage or seasonal jobs are the only option for earning a wage. And that's because industries like farming, logging, mining, manufacturing, and textiles, those were the main source of rural jobs for generation. And they're being increasingly automated or outsourced to other countries, which leaves people living in small towns and rural communities with far fewer ways to earn a living. This is especially hard on men in rural areas. Dr. Jim Ziliak from UK, who's just down the road from me in Kentucky, right before the pandemic, he did a report that found half the men who lack high school degrees in rural communities were out of the labor force in rural America, half. And this was before the pandemic struck. That's compared to a generation ago. In 1967, 90% of men without a high school degree in rural areas had jobs. So clearly the economy is failing rural families. And the recovery from the Great Recession that was experienced in urban areas, it never reached rural communities. The job markets in the suburbs and the cities had long since recovered from the Great Recession, but there was limited growth here in rural communities and small towns. And of course, we know the pandemic has made it much worse. 43% of rural households have lost jobs or wages since the start of the pandemic. And those who have had to rely on work in like the fast food industry or the hotel industry, we know they have been the hardest hit by the closures that came from the pandemic. So our young adults often share just heartbreaking struggles. They want an education, they want an opportunity to better themselves, but they know that that often will mean leaving their families and their communities behind because there just are no opportunities here. So it's not surprising, as Karen mentioned, rural child poverty rates are much higher than urban areas in almost all of the states that have rural designated areas. Rural counties are also more likely to experience persistent poverty, which means at least 20% have been living in poverty for over 30 years. That's meant a low tax base, which has meant weak and fragile infrastructure, limited retail options to access nourishing and affordable food, especially that will accept WIC or SNAP. We rely almost exclusively in many communities on convenience stores and small independent stores for groceries that often have higher food prices for lower quality and less variety of food. The transportation challenges that both Karen and Reggie mentioned are a significant challenge here in rural areas where we can be 30 miles away from our school and 100 miles away from the grocery store. So families in rural communities, we tend to take bulk shopping trips. We go once a month to the largest big box store that's an hour away, which of course means we can only buy shelf-stable food because the rest of it wouldn't last that long. So there's challenges with accessing food from the retail sector. There's challenges from accessing food through the government sector, programmatic barriers, like there's simply not enough summer meal sites in rural communities. We hear of many communities that there may only be one or two sponsor of the summer food service program, and they're both churches that both operate a 1-week VBS school on the same week. And that's the only opportunity kids have to access summer meals in some of these communities. There's lack of access to WIC and SNAP enrollment centers. The emergency food system, as great as the work that Karen's doing is and as impactful as the food bank network is, I think Karen will agree that many rural communities simply are not being adequately served because it's harder and it's more expensive for Karen to send a truck of food to a community that may be 5 hours away from her central distribution warehouse. So that means many of the residents we work with in rural communities have inconsistent or limited hours at the one food pantry that may be open. They're not easily reached. They may not always be able to offer the healthy options that other food banks are able to offer. So all that, in addition to the limited access to technology, including high-speed internet, I'm amazed my internet hasn't crashed already this morning, frankly. And the final thing I'll mention is the acute stigma that those of us in rural communities can feel when we need to ask for help. The very real chance of running into somebody you know at the food pantry or being recognized in line, standing in line outside of the SNAP enrollment center, it's a significant barrier to families asking for the help that they need. So all of this means it should not be a bit surprising to what Karen mentioned, that we know nearly 90% of the counties with the highest child food insecurity rates are rural.
Yeah, those numbers are striking. And there are so many things in what you talked about, Tamara. I don't know that we can dig into all of it. But one thing I do want to elevate is, you mentioned the limited access to the summer meal sites. And, the pandemic in a lot of ways was very similar to what happens every summer, but with even less time to plan, where schools close their doors and millions of kids lose access to free and reduced price meals. And we see food insecurity going up. We see kids gaining more weight during the summer. We see kids experiencing summer learning loss. And so, the lessons that we've learned during the pandemic and getting meals to kids, I think can help when we think about getting meals to kids during the summer. And the other piece that you lifted up, I mean, there was so much in there, I can't lift up all of it. But the other piece that I wanted to dig into a little bit more, and I'm hoping Karen can talk a little bit about, is, we are focusing the summit on childhood hunger, but we know that kids are actually part of families. And so I'm hoping, Karen, that you might be able to talk about, how hunger is experienced by the whole family and what it means for the parents who are struggling to provide for their children.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. This is such an important issue to recognize. And not surprisingly, when families are faced with limited budgets, we can see a natural shift of focus to getting the most calories for the lowest cost. And that focus can naturally result in sacrificing nutrition as they're trying to stretch their budget far enough to meet their food needs. Going through a drive-through to feed the family off the dollar menu can make sense when you're focused on stretching those dollars. And this is one of the reasons at the Idaho Food Bank we offer a cooking and nutrition education program called Cooking Matters. In addition, we provide recipes and shopping tips to help families shop and prepare healthy meals on a low-income budget. We track all of the food that we source and distribute based on nutrition category. We have standards in place for the nutritional value of the food that we're providing to make sure that we are making that healthy food available through our distribution network. Another way we've learned about the broader impact of hunger is through our backpack program, which was mentioned earlier, where we work with schools to provide food to those children who are in need to take home over the weekends so that they have access to that healthy food. And in that program, we get surveys completed by the children, by their parents, and by the teachers about the effectiveness of the program. And we hear that children in the program display better focus on learning, less anxiety. Parents tell us that how it decreases their own stress and anxiety because their children have healthy food and they're doing well in school, which allows them to focus on other challenges. Just to share a story, because this really became clear to me a few years ago when I was visiting with a mother whose daughter was receiving the backpack program, and I was emphasizing how important it was and how happy we were to be able to provide her daughter with that healthy food. And she paused for a moment and she said, that really does matter, but I got to tell you, it's bigger than that. The impact is bigger than that. And she shared what I think we probably all know, but we've never really had to think about or say out loud, that when your child needs food, that becomes a consuming priority for parents. It's impossible to think about anything other than, how do I feed my child? And she's just talked about how grateful she was that pressure had been relieved, that her daughter's nutritional needs were met, which would make her a better employee because now she could focus more on her work. It would allow her to be more involved in community efforts, to just open up her energy to focus on other elements of what she needed to have a healthy life, without that consuming focus on the nutritional needs of her daughter. So that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me, that this is more than food. It has a much greater impact.
Right, Karen, and the research actually backs up everything that you were saying, in that parents are more likely to reduce the amount of food that they eat or go without to try and make sure that their kids are not going hungry. So it is really important to think about the whole family as we think about solving childhood hunger. Reggie, schools returned in lots of different ways this school year, with kids coming to some schools, having kids come to school every single day. In some districts, school kids are coming a couple days a week. In some districts, some kids are coming every single day and other kids are learning remotely every single day. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how schools in Charlotte are operating this school year, and how that affects the work to ensure that students are receiving meals.
Okay, I am very proud to say that for the first time as of yesterday, that all grade levels in Charlotte-Mecklenburg are actually back in person. That's the first time this school year, and that is so tremendous and so very proud of that. We have had K through 5 that have been attending on hybrid plans, but middle school and high school students have not been in person. So they're all back in. And my very first year in school nutrition, just a very short story, I worked as a cafeteria manager. And I worked in a very urban area where I fed most of the kids that came to the school, 1,200 students in the school. I fed 900 for lunch every day. Those students would come in and they would tell me that over the weekend, well, I did have something to eat, but it was mostly crackers or, it was junk food. I was not getting nutritional and healthy food, and they would describe it like I'm describing it, but I knew that they were not getting a complete meal. So the meals that we serve are so important to so many students, and the fact now that they are back in person really speaks volumes of us meeting the need of our students, and I'm very proud of that. And one of the things that has taken place that directors have had to decide in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and other school districts is about how do I serve meals safely during this period? And many things had to be taken into consideration. And so school teams have put together numerous food safety plans, sanitation, social distancing, those kind of things have gone into what's actually taking place in the school right now. So if you go into a cafeteria, you will see the social distancing markers that have been placed there. Instead of the traditional coming through and sitting in the cafeteria, there's a lot of grab and go. But there's also a lot of taking meals to the classroom and in some cases to just the hallways, because some school districts won't even allow you to go in the classroom. So we've had some of those instances, or we'll take them to a gymnasium, which is a more of an open area. SNA did back in August a white paper and really gave great guidance to our school nutrition programs on food safety. And so all of our directors were able to work this information into their plans that they have now in order to serve students. Students still get to choose a meal, and they don't have to use the pen pass, which is one of the things that we had to be concerned about. A lot of touching, the things that we normally were doing. So we've had to change the ways that we do meal accountability in the schools in order that we're safe. So our cafeterias are a whole lot safer. We're serving meals, and students are back in person, and that is great for all of our students in our district. Very proud of that.
And Tamara, I'm just curious, we've seen schools partner with food banks, we've seen YMCAs and Parks and Rec agencies and Boys and Girls Clubs all step into this space. I was wondering if you could elevate any unique partnerships that you would want other communities to replicate.
Right. Yeah. Save the Children has long believed that partnerships truly are the key to bringing about impact in children in rural communities. So yeah, as you mentioned, we've long partnered with school districts, and the pandemic has lifted new partnership opportunities with food banks and the faith community and community-based organizations. But one unique new partnership that I'd like to highlight is our partnership with an ag tech leader in Eastern Kentucky, App Harvest. They recently opened a massive indoor hydroponic farm in Eastern Kentucky and are working on building more, which, by the way, given all the challenges that we've discussed already, that we have great hope here in Kentucky for that endeavor, creating jobs with meaningful pay, let alone increasing all of our access to fresh fruits and vegetables that are grown right here during the winter months. But App Harvest is also interested in helping educate children across Eastern Kentucky on how to grow their own nourishing food and the importance of healthy living. So they have provided materials and has partnered with Save the Children to provide indoor hydroponic grow kits to more than 1,600 children and their families in 6 Eastern Kentucky counties where we work, which are some of the state's most impoverished counties. So the children are receiving everything they need to start their own indoor gardens, seeds, growing nutrient supplies, pots, instructions. They were also able to get live instruction video through video conferences on how to grow their own food with App Harvest's farming experts. So we believe this is just a tremendous example of a really promising public-private partnership that was homegrown, literally, and can help make a difference in the kids who are participating in that partnership.
I think that really feeds into the idea that not everybody can do it alone, and we really need to be working together on this. Well, so we're a year into the pandemic, and I think everybody, is hoping that things will get better and things will wrap up soon. And we are definitely looking ahead to the next school year. Reggie, I wanted to ask you, with the need never being greater, what do you think needs to happen next school year to support children, as all children, because we know there are lots of kids who are learning remotely or learning remotely partially. Our fingers are crossed that they're all going to return to school next fall. But I'm curious what you think needs to happen to support schools as that transition goes forward.
Okay. With a lot of our school districts, school will begin in late July and early August. And I think one of the top priorities for us is the extension of the waivers. Even though we see the pandemic hopefully coming to an end, we know that to begin the school year next year, we will need those waivers in order to reach all of our students and to make certain that all of our students are fed. One of the great things that we have seen this school year is the ability for us to feed all students, regardless of status. And that has really helped our programs to make certain that we are reaching all students. There are so many unemployed individuals out there in families. And in order for us to be prepared as we move forward, one of the things in our position paper this year for SNA is asking for that all healthy meals at no charge be given to all of our students. If that were to happen, that would take so much strain off of our families and would allow our staffs to focus on just feeding students. So as we move forward and looking into next year, those are two main things. First of all, the extension of the waivers would be fantastic. And then the second thing is support for feeding healthy meals to all students at no charge. That would be absolutely great for our industry and great for those hungry students that are out there in this country.
Yeah, Reggie, I can agree with you more. Schools provide textbooks, they provide transportation to get kids to school. Food is just as important to making sure that kids achieve academically, and we should be making sure that all kids in all schools are able to get school breakfast and school lunch. So I couldn't agree with you more. And we also are very excited to have USDA extend the waivers next year too. So we are communicating that as well. Karen, looking forward, I was hoping you might talk a little bit about what food banks and communities could use or need, or what needs to happen in order to be able to better fight childhood hunger.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to also emphasize and support what Reggie just covered in terms of the important role that the schools play. The schools in Idaho, as I'm sure across the country, have been absolutely phenomenal in partnering with the Idaho Food Bank and other organizations with that consistent focus on, or do whatever we can, whatever needs to happen to make sure these kids have the meals that are available. So totally agree. Those waivers have got to stay in place. We've got to continue to make that food available. So when we're looking forward from the food bank perspective, the first thing we recognize is that we're not going to food bank our way out of childhood hunger. it's just too big. And as we've talked about throughout this panel, it is about partnering and working together and community organizations coming together. At the same time, we can all use our voices. We need to ensure that strong support for the federal child nutrition programs. Children must have that access to the nutritious food while in school or in child care centers. And families who are struggling and needing to make ends meet, they need the supplemental assistance for their food needs that are available through those federal programs. So we really have an emphasis in our advocacy work to reinforce the importance of those programs. The next is that we need to meet children where they are beyond the schools. And I think there are more opportunities to work with pediatricians or health centers, other nonprofits, to be aware of screening for childhood hunger, find out if that child has access to the food that they need, and if not, have the resources available to help close that gap. And finally, I would say we really need to take a holistic approach to curbing family poverty. Hunger is a symptom of other issues for the family, whether it's bills that can't be paid, job loss, low wages, unaffordable housing, medical needs that can't be met. Anyone can fall in hard times, but we need to understand what's breaking down and address those issues. And while doing this, we can make sure that their resources are accessible to help support the family through those trying times. We know so many Americans are just tired or exhausted from dealing with the conditions of the past year. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to build the infrastructure to provide the quickest path to recovery.
Agreed. Tamara, I'm going to ask you a very similar question. I'm just curious what additional support rural communities need to eliminate childhood hunger.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Karen just said. I mean, for both rural and urban communities, it's resources. The root cause of hunger in America is poverty. So rural communities need to have enough jobs for every adult, and they need to pay enough for the family to live on. So that would be the first resource if I could wave a magic wand to fix childhood hunger in rural communities. But, it's equally essential that we empower the citizens of rural America with more support by the way of all these great federal nutrition programs we've been mentioning, SNAP, WIC, pandemic, EBT, to help ensure that they can provide the best for their children. Addressing the geographic isolation, the transportation barriers that are just so common in rural areas, allowing the waivers that have been enacted during the pandemic that have allowed for non-congregate feeding of meals have been a game changer in rural communities. And yes, the ideal is those meals are served in a congregate setting with a caring adult who's also providing enrichment opportunities. That's the ideal. But in communities where there are not enough sites and there are not enough adults and that's not an option, or if the child may live two miles away from the feeding site, but there's no sidewalk to get between his house and the feeding site, and mom's at work at the gas station, she can't drive him there, those kids are missing out. So we would love to see those kind of waivers made permanent in rural communities that don't have enough congregate sites already. And similarly, the success of the PEBT program, we should make that open to any rural community. There should be a permanent summer EBT in every community for kids who cannot access meals over the summer in particular, because their community just doesn't offer enough sites. And, similarly, allowing online services through the WIC program has made such a difference to families who have a hard time getting to the in-person appointments and the required nutrition services, which are great, but allowing those to be delivered online could really make a difference for families in rural communities. Love what Reggie and his great organizations are doing. If we could support more small school systems to have the expertise so that they know how to enroll in these federal nutrition programs and they know how to maximize the reimbursement and the participation rate, that could be a huge game changer. And I know Reggie's already working on that. That could make a very big difference in rural communities. Addressing food deserts, it'd be great to make sure every rural community had a full service supermarket that was easily accessible. The transportation infrastructure would make such a difference in rural communities. Let's bulk up the public transportation system so that if you don't have a car, if you're sharing a car with another family and it breaks down, you still have a way to get to the food that you need for your kids to stay healthy. Changing the narrative to address stigma and shame. I think that may be one of the only silver linings to come out of this pandemic is people are finally understanding it's not because you're lazy that you're struggling to feed your kids. It's for no fault of their own that so many families across America are struggling. So I'm really hoping that we can build on this momentum to change the narrative about who struggles to feed their kids and why. And then finally, just as we consider solutions, Save the Children is really committed to empowering the resources that rural communities already have, the many great strengths and strong stakeholders and engaged networks that are already in existence in rural communities. And so Save the Children is working on identifying what rural communities are already doing, that the solutions that they're already enacting, but the rest of us may not know about, or if they've had great ideas but don't have the resources to implement them. Save the Children is going to work to lift up new ideas for ending child hunger, particularly in rural communities, helping make sure they have the resources to implementing those and then scaling them up and sharing them with other communities so we can truly make sure every child in rural America has the food they need to thrive and succeed.
Agreed. And I have to say, and I'm assuming people who are watching today feel the same way, I am in awe of all the great work that's being done across the country. And it does also leave me feeling a little overwhelmed about how much more work we need to be doing to overcome childhood hunger. So I want to ask one final question of all the speakers. And I know that everyone joining us today wants to know what they can do to help. So I'm going to start with Karen with the question, what are the tangible actions that every single person watching at home today can take to help end childhood hunger in their communities or nationally? Karen?
Yeah, so just to reinforce what Reggie and Tamara have already mentioned, we have got to pay attention to the public policy issues in front of us, the programs that are available to continue to provide the food assistance that's so badly needed. We need to protect those programs. So use your voices, make contact with your policy leaders, your state leaders, your congressional delegation to protect those kinds of programs for families and especially for those children. I think it's also a good opportunity to get engaged, find out what do your schools and childcare centers say they need. Has anybody asked them? Let's make sure that their voices are being heard and that those needs are being shared. Look at what the nonprofits in your local community are engaged in and ask, do they need volunteers? They need help with the children directly, or to clean floors or to stock shelves. And sometimes it's not glamorous work. Could be serving on their board or helping them raise money. I guarantee you, your help and support would be greatly appreciated. I also wanted to build on what Tamara was talking about. I think this is so important to continue our work on removing the stigma associated with needing food assistance. We've just gone through a unique experience, and as Tamara mentioned, through no fault of their own, putting thousands of people in this condition with no warning. And for most of those people, it creates this unwarranted sense of shame and embarrassment. We need to make sure we're doing everything we can to remove that. And I think if you have the opportunity, if you see someone who is struggling, tell them about where those resources are. Let them know that the community has support for them. And better yet, maybe even offer to go with them, because that first time of visiting a food bank or a relief organization can be really hard. So offer those kinds of supports and reassure them that the community and you care about them and that you respect them. Another encouragement is don't be silent. Let your voice be heard in your community. Reach out to those other organizations. And finally, be generous. Be generous with your time, with your talent, with your funds, to keep the nonprofits, school organizations healthy and effective. For those of you that have already been very generous in your giving, thank you. Thank you from all of us. And as just a tidbit, you can find your local food bank by visiting feedingamerica.org website. And most food banks have a partner locator on their website, so you can find the organizations in your local community that are addressing childhood hunger. So in summary, let's be part of the solution.
Thanks, Karen. And we are getting close to time. In fact, I think we're a minute over, but I do want to make sure to give everybody a chance to answer this question. So, Tamara, what are the tangible actions that you would recommend for people at home to take to help end childhood hunger in their community or nationally?
I'd echo everything Karen said, and one specific tangible action. You can go to SaveTheChildrenActionNetwork.org right now, or as soon as this conference is over, click on Act Now, and then contact your lawmakers and tell your elected officials what you learned today, what you're fired up about, and demand that we do more to make sure that every child in America has the food they need. So SaveTheChildrenActionNetwork.org. Click on Act Now. And the other thing I'll mention real briefly, those of us who are starting to get seed catalogs, when you're planting your summer garden, plant a row and plan to donate the fresh fruits and vegetables to your local food pantry. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Tamara. Reggie, you're up last. You get the last word.
Okay, last word very quickly. First of all, I just want to thank you, Crystal and Chobani, for giving all of us this opportunity just to share about our love for children and families and making certain that they are fed nutritious meals. School meal programs are critical to the success of students. Understand that. And I would tell anyone in the community, try school meals. You know, school meals that are served today are not like the meals that you may have eaten when you were in school. They are very healthy, very nutritious. We all offer fruits and vegetables, so many options for our students. Try them and volunteer locally. You know, some of our school districts need assistance. Volunteer, go in there, but we need your support. You know, it would be absolutely wonderful for us to get healthy meals at no charge for all of our students. If you see anything, legislation out there, and you know someone, speak up and say volumes about what we need to do with our programs. Everything that has been spoken today is because all of us love the fact that we know that there are hungry students and families out there that need to be fed. And we are excited about the work that we do in school nutrition and in all these programs with Karen and Tamara. We're all excited about the work that we do to reach those who are hungry in our communities.
Thanks, Reggie. And I think that's probably a good place to end. One thing I did want to say is, FRAC, I'm excited at the elevation of working to get policymakers to really focus on ending childhood hunger. And FRAC does track all that stuff. You can go to frac.org and get more information and engage as well. Save the Children does wonderful work on policy, and so does Feeding America, as well as the School Nutrition Association. So there's a lot of really great resources to help you dig in deeper at the policy front. And there's a lot of really great things people can be doing in the community that all of our speakers elevated. I really want to thank you all for joining us today, both the audience and the panel. I feel like we had a really fruitful and interesting discussion, and I think there's a lot of work to do. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.